Good morning and welcome to Community Conversations. I'm Vicki Green. Today's topic is what I would say maybe a two-pronged topic and an important one. We're going to talk about suicide and mental health. Suicide has been called by many organizations a public health crisis, and the numbers are only increasing. According to the CDC in Massachusetts, we lose someone to suicide every 14 hours, but we lose nearly two youths, I should say, to suicide each week. 2 kids each week to suicide. And those are stories you don't see in the newspaper every day. So what can we all do to slow or stop these deaths from happening? Are they preventable? Well, I've just a person in studio to answer some of those questions. She was here with me about a year ago, and unfortunately or fortunately, we're keeping it in the forefront, talking about it again. So my guest is Jessica Zaquera. Good morning, Jessica.
Good morning.
She is the Community Education Specialist at the SHINE Initiative, or as I simply say, SHINE, which is located in Worcester, but it's a Central Mass regional organization that deals with mental health. We're going to get a lot more into that. And we'll also talk a lot about what they do, particularly with kids, schools, parents, and educators. And Jessica's also been on staff and volunteered for about 7 years with the Mass chapter of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, which I call AFSP because that's a lot to say. And she is the chair of the Central Mass Out of the Darkness Walk, which is coming up September 14th. And so we're going to talk about that and the details for that, and they'll all be on our website when we go up on our all 3 station websites. So the walk is coming up, and she's also on the Mayor's Task Force for Mental Health in the City of Worcester. So first, congratulations to you, because if you live in this area, people may not know that are all listening that you have a very big part of this community. You were nominated and accepted to be part of this leadership program that is being run by the Chamber and the Worcester Greater Worcester Community Foundation. So they pick a very small number, maybe 20 people, to go over public policy and leadership, and they picked you, and that's so congratulations.
Thank you.
So before we get to SHINE and the important work that group does, let's talk about the Out of the Darkness Walk. What is it? What are the details? And why do you do it?
Sure. So the walk itself is going to be taking place on September 14th at Institute Park. It will, registration and check-in will start at 9 o'clock. And then we start with the opening ceremonies at 10, and the walk itself is a 5K. So it's about 3 miles, and people can either walk or stay in the park, and we'll have resource tables so that people know what's available in the community.
What would be an example of some of the resource tables?
Just other organizations that actually provide direct services if they needed, a place to turn. We obviously know that issues like this, it's not just a one-day thing where they show up at a walk and that's the only day that you're dealing with mental health issues or the loss of someone or your own struggle. We want people to know what's available to them every other day. So we ask other organizations to come in and let everybody know what's available to them beyond just that one day. But the purpose of the walk is really for people who have lost a loved one to suicide, who have struggled themselves with any mental health issues, who have attempted or really just understand the importance of supporting this cause, to come together on a specific day to all be in the same place at once. There's certainly a value to having all of these people together. We have people that say they look forward to this day because they know it's a day that they'll be surrounded by people who understand. Mm-hmm. And we just talk about the issue, and it's a family-friendly event. So I bring my kids. We have a lot of people who bring their kids.
Yeah, you're a mom of 3, I should say.
I am a mom of 3.
And you do all these and you do all of this work. And people have to understand too, SHINE, there's 3 of you or 4 of you?
There's 3 of us.
3 of you. There's an executive director, yourself, and another staffer. So there's 3 people that start work on the SHINE Mental Health Initiative and go into the schools. That's another thing. But it does kind of intertwine with, obviously,
Absolutely.
When you go into schools, you're talking about suicide, especially with kids, because that's such a high age group where they're so vulnerable, and unfortunately, it happens quite a bit. So at the walk,
yes,
I read about you don't need to raise money necessarily to participate, and you can participate if you've had a friend, if you've been directly involved, had somebody committed suicide, if you've thought about it, if you just want to walk to support other people. Right. And then they give out these beads I saw online. What is that?
So we have a lot of people that come for different reasons. We have a lot of people that create teams. If you come individually, you kind of always seem to find someone who you can relate to. We have memorial activities, But one of the really unique things that AFSP does is we have beads. There's 9 different colors that represent different types of loss or personal struggle or supporting the cause. So you can kind of just look around the park and see all of these different people with these beads. And you can look at someone that maybe has the same color bead as you and just know without really needing to say a word that this is someone that in some way knows what you're going through. So for example, if you're wearing white beads, which represents the loss of a child, and you can look at someone else that's wearing white beads, you know that that person has also experienced the loss of a child. And maybe that loss isn't exactly like yours, but you know in some way that they know what it's like to lose a child to suicide. And so imagine looking into the sea of people and seeing all of these beads that you can relate to or you recognize.
And when you talk
pretty
about a sea of
powerful.
people, you told me last year, we talked before that walk that you ended up with raising $140,000.
Yeah, last year we raised $140,000,
You had 1,000
and we have
people?
about 1,000 walkers. So I anticipate we'll be at or above that this year. So it's pretty powerful to be able to see that.
That's amazing. So it's at September 14th. You don't need to have a team, but if you,
You don't
want
need to have
you
a
can-
team. I would
You can go online to register.
I would definitely recommend registering beforehand just so the check-in's easier, but you can certainly register the day of the walk when you come and check in.
All right. So last time you were here, it was about a year ago, but you told me something that really has stayed with me. And I'm sure you've heard so many you told your own personal story.
Yep.
Because I know at Shine, too, we talked about the 3 of you that do so much work, which is amazing. You've all had some issue with, because Shine is more mental illness, which is suicide is certainly a part of. But mental health, you talked about your own story.
Yep.
And do you mind telling us a little bit about it?
No, not at all. So I actually myself started struggling when I was a teenager, probably actually in middle school, and at the time had no idea what I was going through until I was a much older teenager and could kind of start to understand a little bit better. I actually lost my best friend to suicide in high school. So in addition to struggling on my own, now having a suicide loss kind of exacerbated those issues and ended up having my own attempt later on in high school. Several years later, after becoming a parent, myself had a really good friend who was now not only my friend, but a mentor to my son, who was 5 at the time, and just spent a lot of time with us, ended up losing her to suicide as well. So now, in addition to my own loss, having to try and explain to a young child what suicide is.
How do you explain to a 5-year-old?
I think you have to, at least for myself, I decided that I wanted to be as honest as I could while also being at his level. And, you know, I was a young mom at the time and not working for a mental health organization, so I just had to explain it kind of the best that I could to him, and just saying that, you know, sometimes people get sick in their bodies and sometimes people also get sick in their brains. And for her, she had a sickness called depression, and she was in a lot of pain. And at his age, I didn't explain that she killed herself. I just said that there was this sickness in her brain that ended up being too strong for her, and that she died because of that. And at the time, I didn't know whether I was doing the right thing or not. I just knew that it felt right to be honest with him, and I've been honest with him ever since. And now he's actually almost 18 next week. Now he talks about mental health openly, and he has been in situations where he's had to help people and give them the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and he's struggled himself. I hope he's okay with me kind of telling that, but and so I like to think I did
think
the right
everybody,
thing.
to be honest with you, the fact that the reason I'm doing this show and you're here and we keep in touch is that this issue needs the conversation. Your tagline currently for Shine is join the conversation, and this is community conversations. And this is a big conversation. That's why I'm bringing her back. They're doing the walk again. We have to keep this up.
Yeah.
It's not just when some celebrity dies or when, politician starts talking about it, or this is a day. You deal with this issue every day through the mental health work that you do with Shine, and you must. meet millions of kids, some of whom probably come forward and
Many,
say,
yeah.
"I have a friend." When you're giving these presentations,
Or themselves.
right?
They
And
self-disclose.
some there still may be that stigma. Now, the interesting thing was when we talk about statistics, we were talking about it's predominantly, if you look overall, not just at kids, it's adults and it's male adults.
Yeah.
And what shocked me was the age.
Yeah, the highest rate of suicide is actually in middle-aged white men. Which I think- nationally, yeah. And I think that surprises a lot of people because I think there's so many people assume that the highest rate is for teenagers. And the rate is high, it is increasing, but the highest rate overall is middle-aged white men. And I think that just speaks to the stigma that still exists, the stigma that existed in that generation, the fact that we teach our boys and our men about having to be stoic, about how, the saying, boys don't cry or suck it up or so many of these things that we kind of even inadvertently teach our children, but specifically our boys. And I think they grow up with that. And we need to start changing that in our
I think we
conversation.
have, though, don't you?
I think
I
we
mean,
are getting so much better.
I have
but
a
we
daughter.
still have to keep working at it.
Exactly. And that's why I think we need to keep talking about this.
Yeah.
Whether people want to talk, it's not a happy topic.
No.
But guess what?
But it can be
Not
normalized. It can be
Yes.
included into everyday conversations. When you're having the conversation about, how are you feeling, instead of just stopping at, how are you feeling and taking the answers as physically, I think we can push it a little bit further and also ask for the responses on emotionally, how are people feeling? And that can
You literally
start.
say, "How are you feeling emotionally?" Or how would you, in conversation,
Well, I mean,
you
like
would say,
when I have conversations, my younger kids are 8 and they're 5, and my oldest son is going off to college next week, and so I talk to them about how my feelings are all over the place, and that there are times that I feel happy for him, but at the same time I feel sad for me, and that I can have two feelings at the same time, and then
And he just doesn't say, "Oh, Mom," because I've got a girl who's just 1 year older, and so she's.
I
going
think
into
he's
her
used to me by
sophomore
now.
year. Oh yeah, it is your business, but you are in that business. But my daughter, we've had issues in our family, just every family. Literally depression, anxiety.
Yeah.
And if people say that they've never once felt depressed, it's either because, in my opinion, which I don't often say on the show, but in my opinion, it's not fact. I feel like some of the people that I know in my circle and that I've met, even doing this show and in communities, they don't know what depression is. They don't know if it is just because there's situational depression. Just because a doctor doesn't give you medicine and say you are officially depressed with a diagnosis doesn't mean that you don't have depression. You may not need medication, but you may be having a down day. Well, the kids might think, "I'm having a down day and this is it, I'm done. I'm
Well,
out."
and we do teach that to kids. What is the difference between sadness and having a down day, which everybody has, and then the signs of depression, which are very different? And how do you recognize it? And how do you talk to an adult, or how do you talk to your friends, and how do you approach them? And if you're happy, what do? You laugh, and you're allowed to express that emotion, and anger even. There are ways that you're allowed to express that emotion. And why do we stop at sadness when all of a sudden we're not allowed to express that by crying? And kind of helping to teach kids that no, it's okay to express all of the different emotions in different ways. And you just have to start, I think, having that conversation at a younger age.
Parents. We have a lot of parents
and
listening.
teachers
yeah.
and each other, and just changing that culture overall is what we try to do, and kind of have a wraparound approach. But for myself, it's just a matter of also living the
honest.
example
Yeah.
as well, and that's, I think, very difficult for a lot of adults because we just kind of have this mentality that I have to be strong and I have to be stoic and.
Or I have to be the parent.
Exactly. But being the parent is also showing the example that vulnerability is not weak. Vulnerability is actually there's strength in vulnerability.
And I agree with that. And when I was saying my daughter going off to college, we've talked about emotions all for years. And because I believe, because I had, in my growing up years, it was very difficult to talk to my father and his generation about if things weren't all super happy, hunky-dory.
Yeah.
He didn't really want to go there, and some of it is the male stoicism, some of it's
And it can be
ingrained
uncomfortable.
from his parents, and so I grew up thinking, we can't. So with my daughter, I made a conscious decision, to make sure that I check in with. I don't schedule them. But, we'll be having conversation. I'll say, so you are, now she's been in college, so you're going to get to this. And boys and girls are different, definitely.
Yeah.
And each person is different. That's why I think this issue is so complex.
Yeah.
Because kids are different from adults, but every adult is different. Every child is different. Everybody has different thoughts. A lot of people have common thoughts. But for the most part, I'll bring it up in conversation over a cup of coffee. So, how was rehearsal this week? Did you, and sometimes I'll get, Mom, do I have to answer all these questions? And then other times it'll just be a natural conversation. And that's what I want it to be. And that's what I hear you saying, is that it should be a natural conversation.
Yeah. So
the other statistic that I want to bring up that to me was shocking was in Massachusetts. And this is from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. It's happening in our backyard. In Massachusetts, more than 5 times as many people, not just youth, people died by suicide in Massachusetts in 2017 than in alcohol-related motor vehicle accidents. 5 times more people died by suicide than died in drunk driving accidents. It's scary, and it's the second leading cause of death in Massachusetts for kids ages 15 to 34.
And that's the national statistic too. Second leading cause of death.
Yeah. Yep. So here's where Shine comes in, because we're going to talk about the walk a little bit more. Again, the details, we said September 14th, but on October 10th, Shine has a big gala coming up. And Shine, I want to get into a little bit because we didn't get to talk about it when you were here last time. It was founded, it's in Worcester, but again, from what I've read, and it's been widely publicized, that you're getting calls, you have 3 little people, staff, has done such an incredible job going into the schools that you're getting calls from like the Berkshires and like all over the place saying they want to know, what are you doing in these schools that's doing such a great job. So it was founded by a group of administrators and employees at Fidelity back in 2013, so 16 years ago. What would you say, in not exact words, but what is the mission? And you don't really receive any state or federal funding, so there's 3 of you. So what is the mission of Shine?
Sure. Well, we're small but mighty, I like to say. Me personally as well, but the organization itself. I really like to say that our, education and awareness is our main focus for youth, but
of mental health issues, not just suicide.
Mental health, mental wellness, really.
Mental wellness.
Combating stigma, mental health issues and conditions in youth and children. Our focus is youth, but I think.
And what ages were?
We started in high schools, but have realized that the younger you go, the more effect you're going to have by going upstream. So we now have our groups, which I'll talk about. We have our groups in middle schools, and we've even started going. One of my main goals when I came on board as staff was to start trying to get into elementary schools as well. So we've piloted a program in an elementary school, and we're working with a couple other elementary schools to see how we can incorporate this talk about feelings. And
you're not clinicians.
We are not clinicians, and that was one of the first things that we actually tell the students and the staff when we come in, is that we're not clinicians and we're not here to diagnose you, and you're not going to leave here being able to diagnose people. Because we want it to be kind of a ground level conversation, and we want people to feel comfortable knowing that we're not here to, tell you that you have this and you have that. It's really, we want youth to have a voice, and we want them to understand that we know that you spend most of your time with each other, and we understand that.
Is this what you say to like high school kids?
And this is what we say, and the middle school kids too, is this is actually the first generation of youth that they're more stressed out than adults.
It's the first generation?
It is.
They used to tell us that.
I think they've thought it, but this is, they're dealing with a lot at this generation right now, and they have a lot on their plates and a lot coming at them, and we want them to know that we understand this and that their voice matters. So, we come in and we talk to them. When we do our presentations, we talk to them about not only just taking care of your mental wellness and why it's just as important as your physical wellness and the connection between the two, but then we do get into the harder topics about what if you're not in a good place? What if you've started experiencing all of these things for more than 2 weeks, which is kind of the time frame that.
So it's not like having a bad day.
Exactly. Everybody does. And we tell them that, and we give them examples of, kind of what bad days are and what, how we all feel it. But the time frame that research has shown is around the 2 week mark is when you need to start
If you've been depressed for 2 weeks.
Exactly. We give them examples of, and we ask them, what do you guys know about mental illness? What are some signs and symptoms that you've learned about? So we try to make it very interactive. And we talk to them about what those signs and symptoms are. And then we try to teach them, now, how do you have that conversation? How do you talk to a friend that you're worried about? If you are beyond worried in just a general way and having that conversation, and let's say we start talking about suicide, how do you have that direct conversation? How do you actually use those words?
And how would you answer that?
How do they ask it? Mm-hmm. We tell them the best thing to do is to be direct. Ask someone, are you thinking about suicide? Are you thinking about killing
yourself? So you're not
yourself?
putting that idea, because I would think that some kids might think they're putting that idea
I think a lot
in
of
their head.
people think that they're putting the idea in their head, but first of all, look at the media and how much suicide is already talked about out there. If a kid hasn't heard the word suicide by now, I'm not sure where they've been, but there's so much out there that they're already learning about, and chances are they're not learning about it the right way. If you're that worried about someone that you're already contemplating asking the question, chances are that you're actually opening the door and inviting them to talk about something that they are not sure who to talk to about. And you're probably relieving them a little bit of holding on to something that they're not sure who to talk to about.
So when you go in, let's talk about the high school level, because I've seen the list of schools, and we're not just talking Worcester. We're talking, you've gone everywhere from Groton to Marlboro to Grafton, all over the place, to go into these schools, and you work with these wellness. Some of these high schools have these groups that have been formed.
Yeah, so we don't just go in and have a presentation and then we're gone and that's all you see of us. We actually stay in the schools that are interested. And we create these student wellness teams, which we actually are completely have completely
Student wellness teams?
Yeah, we've completely revamped, which we're going to be announcing at the start of the school year. But we're now calling these teams our Mind Matters teams, and we want
Our Mind Matters.
Mind Matters.
Oh, Mind Matters.
Because we want kids to understand exactly what it says, that your mind matters, and they're student-led groups, so they have a faculty advisor.
So it's like an extracurricular group.
Yep. They have a faculty advisor that's there to kind of be the connection between them and the school and the administrator to make sure that what they're doing is allowed. And they have us as a support to connect them with resources. A lot of the schools we do provide funding for so that they can do activities.
Oh, you give funding to the schools?
Yep.
For some? Wow.
They can apply for grants from us. But the kids decide what is important in their school. The kids decide what activities they want to do for their school to help the awareness level in their school so that they can teach their peers about what they're learning. They can teach their peers about what are some activities we can do to help take care of our mental health. What can we do to teach our peers about mental illness and mental health so that they learn the facts. Some schools have even said, we want our teachers to be the first
I was
ones
just gonna ask you,
that benefit.
What I was going to say is when you want to go, in case people are listening that wondering if it's in their school or they haven't heard about it or their teachers, or they want to approach a teacher because they'd like to form this group, do you go through the teachers and kind of give them a training? Do you give an educators, do you have separate meetings for them?
So the great thing I think about Shine is that we adapt to the school. We don't come in and say you have to do it this way or no way. Every school is different. They have different needs. They have different schedules. So some schools it's a teacher that really wants us to come in and contacts us.
You.
Some schools it's an administrator that knows their schools need this. Some schools it's a parent that starts the ball rolling, and some schools it's the kids. So we're usually we're contacted by whoever that champion is in the school first, and we kind of walk them through, this is the best way to do it. We'll usually meet with either the guidance department or the administrators. We'll talk about what's the best approach for your school. A lot of times we'll start with the staff because we do think it's important to kind of go from the top down, because you do need to change the whole culture, not just one part of it. But sometimes we will start with the kids. Some schools want us to come in during specific class periods because that's the only thing that they're able to change in their schedule. There are some schools that have been able to give us an entire day and the kids rotate and we stay where we are.
It's amazing, though, because you think about guidance counselors who all you hear about is that they're over, there's so much work. Yeah. I was actually told by my daughter when she was in high school, at the beginning of when I wanted to talk about, they said, all we do is the guidance counselor. And I actually knew the head of it. But there were like 3 of them plus the the head of the guidance department, this was in high school, basically saying, not in these words, but your daughter doesn't have a problem. So we have so many kids that have problems and issues that I'll talk to you, but I don't really have time. She's doing fine.
Yeah.
So why are you contacting me? Because they deal with the IEPs and the special ed, and then college admissions they dealt with us and did a great job. But they're saying they're so overworked, and this isn't just her school. I've heard it from other people that I know that are school counselors, is that, they are so overworked in the college process and that they don't even have time.
Yeah.
And even in the middle school, they have time. They have to work with behavior issues, or they have so many things to do that they can't just talk about everyday feelings.
Yeah.
But when you go to these groups, do you find kids like joining these groups? Because back in my day, I don't think if you said, we have a group of the Model UN where you talk about politics, or are you going to join a group to talk about mental health? I think people would choose the UN 100%.
Well, like we said, the culture is definitely changing, and I think kids are a lot more open to talking about it. So they want to be able to talk about it openly. And I think when we tell them that this is your conversation, this is your ability to talk about what you think is important, we do have a lot of kids that want to be the ones to decide and want to change that and want to be the ones that say to the adults in their lives, like, this is what we need, this is what we want you to understand about us.
I think it's so amazing.
It's been great that we have grown as much as we have.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing.
We need to clone ourselves.
I was going to say, no, but you get these kids to be their own advocates.
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
You're doing your job that way.
Their voice matters.
Absolutely. And the fact that they even know about this little group, I mean, that words got to be my mouth traveling. Like, hey, they came to our school, so then that school wants you. There's 3 of you.
Yep.
And actually, the executive director who took over, Fred Kalin, who took over, in January of this year from your longtime executive director, he had a fantastic quote that I found. And whenever I do this show, I spend hours looking at past research and data, and I take my shows very seriously no matter what the issue is, even if it's a happy issue, which a lot of times it is, or it's economic, or I take my time. And Fred Kalin, who's the executive director now, there was an article in Worcester Magazine at the beginning of the year, maybe February, and he was saying that he suffered from anxiety. Like you said, everybody has their issues. And that growing up, nobody ever wanted to talk about it. But now people are talking about it. And he said he often goes into a classroom and he asks the students, he says, who's had a broken bone? And they raise their hands if they have. And then he said, this was in the article, who's been hurt in a sports game? He raised their hand. He said, and then he says to them, depression and anxiety is no different than a broken bone. It's brain pain. Mm-hmm. And I frankly think I should fit that into one of your you got to put that in your material, because that's what's stuck in my head, brain pain. And I think anytime you think, whether it's depression, anxiety, feelings of suicidality, feeling hopelessness, whatever it is, bipolar, manic, whatever it is, it's brain pain. So if you break your leg, what do? You go, you're not going to walk around with a broken bone. Well, maybe some people would, but most kids, their parents are going to take them to the doctor to fix that bone and put a cast on it. And in many cases, the cast that's not always antibiotic. Then you have physical therapy and you have other things, depending on the injury. Think about it, right? And it said that brain pain really sat with me. Yeah. And it said, that's exactly it. But how come people are afraid? And I frankly think it's a lot of old people my age. I'm not that old. But, I mean, my daughter's generation, and we were talking about this before the show, I feel like she talks about it much more. And she's like, oh, so-and-so has a therapy appointment Tuesday, Mom. We can't do this party because she's got a therapy appointment. Yeah. Back when I was in high school, you wouldn't be telling people you were going to a therapy appointment. So I think we've made a lot of progress, in my opinion, in these schools and the work that you're doing. But this term brain pain, I mean, it really resonated with me.
Well, and I think that's what normalizing the conversation is it's showing kids that, and kids are the ones that I think are going to change that culture. But it's kind of making that connection between mental health and physical health really shouldn't be treated that differently. Your body doesn't separate from, your head is connected to your body, your brain controls your whole body.
But there's nothing wrong with it.
It needs to be healthy for the rest of you to be healthy.
Right. I mean, if you break your leg, would someone turn around and say, you did not? Yeah. Like if you say, I'm depressed, why?
Yeah. Well, that's normalizing the conversation.
But you break your leg and somebody doesn't argue with you if a doctor tells you. So I think it's just a great analogy, and I wanted to bring that up. So as we wrap up, let's talk about Shine. We have the Out of the Darkness Walk. We'll have the website on our website after the show airs. And the walk, you can register online, but you don't have to. You can show up and where's the
can.
registration desk?
It'll be Institute Park.
Institute Park. Is
The
it-
check-in will be right there.
Okay, so near WPI.
Yes.
Okay. So, and you don't have to pay money. If you want to get a T-shirt, you can start raising like $150.
Yeah, if
but
you raise
can-
$150, then you do get a walk T-shirt, but it's not required.
But you can get the beats for free. You can show up. You can talk it out. You can contact Shine. We will put their website out. Their gala is coming up in October. What day is it?
October 10th.
Oh,
and
yeah, it's World Mental Health
It
Day.
is, and tickets will be on sale soon.
And who's the speaker for that? this year?
Shamikwa Holtzclaw, she's a mental health activist. She's a former basketball champion. She's amazing. So she's got a wonderful story, and she shares her story of struggling with her mental health while she was winning all of these
big
titles,
basketball
and yeah, she's phenomenal. So
I mean, you've had
very
some
excited.
big speakers in the past. This is a big deal.
Yeah.
And I don't think enough people know about it. So it's the Shine Gala, October 10th at Mechanics Hall in Worcester, but you can come from near and far if Shine has touched you or your kids or your students. Feel free to check out the gala. As we said, they don't get state and federal funding. It's all grant money and private funding. So, as you said, Jessica, awareness and education are the keys to getting this rate of suicide down and breaking down the stigma and the shame. And that's why we do this show. So, again, Out of Darkness Walk, September 14th, the Shine Gala, October 10th. And let's try and somehow keep the conversation going. And as you said, join the conversation, as Shine says. So thank you for being here today, Jessica.
you.
Somehow, just like last year when you were here, you make me feel like there's hope. You know, like this conversation, these mighty three people are affecting every time you go into that school. It's like the telephone game. You get in front of 10 kids and they're going to tell 10 kids and they're going to tell 10 kids and hopefully tell their parents.
That's what we
And we hope the kids won't suffer in silence. So, again, we'll put the AFSP and the Shine websites up on our station. Can easily be found online in emergency. Samaritans are still around. You can get their number. There's ways to text. So that's it. Thank you, Jessica Zaquera.
Thank
That's
you.
Community Conversations. I'm Vicki Green. Let's all do your part and make it a wonderful day. Wonderful day. Wonderful day. Wonderful day.